If you open a map of the US and really look at what's outside the cities, you start noticing these long, straight lines pretty fast. They don't match roads, and they don't follow state borders. They cut right through farmland and keep going into forests. In some places, they stretch for miles without stopping. They're especially easy to spot along major highways. In parts of the Midwest and along the East Coast, you'll see long sections where a fence just runs alongside the road for a really long distance. You can find the same thing in Texas, Wisconsin, Pennsylvania, and a bunch of other states. This isn't one big project or a single line. It's the same kind of solution showing up again and again across the country. If you zoom in, it's obvious these aren't just lines on a map. These are real physical structures. Most of the time, it's metal posts with wire mesh stretched between them. They're usually several feet tall and clearly built to stay there for years. What really matters is where they're placed. You don't see them around cities or industrial areas. They show up in those in-between zones, where human infrastructure meets the wild. Roads, farms, and power lines cut through areas where animals are constantly moving, and that's exactly where these fences show up the most. And visually, they don't look like they're protecting anything specific. They don't form closed loops around towns, and they're not marking borders. They just run along roads or cut across open land where, at first glance, there's no obvious reason for a barrier that long. So if you want to understand why these fences keep showing up all over the country, you have to look not just at the roads and farms, but at what's happening in between them, because that's where the real reason starts to show up. Now, let's look at how the country is actually set up. The US is huge, and people and wildlife are constantly crossing paths. There's no clear separation. Everything overlaps. If you look at a map, most roads don't just connect cities. They cut straight through open land, forests, fields, hills, farmland, the same places where animals live and move around, including deer. So, in a way, roads are basically slicing these areas apart. The same thing happens with farms. Agriculture in the US takes up a huge amount of land, and a lot of those fields sit right next to forests or open wilderness. For people, that just makes sense, but for animals, that's not a boundary. They don't know where the wild ends and someone's property begins. So you end up with the same space being used by two different systems at the same time. On one side, you've got roads, cars, farms, power lines. On the other, you've got deer moving along their usual paths, looking for food, just living the way they always have. They cross roads because that's where their paths go. They wander onto farms because that's where the food is. And this isn't rare. It happens all the time, every single day. And that's where the problem starts. Infrastructure in the US was built for people. Roads were placed where it made sense for transportation, and farms were set up where they could be productive. None of it was designed around how animals move. Over time, that made these encounters unavoidable. The more roads you build, the more often animals end up right in the middle of it. And animals on the road, that's where things start getting dangerous for people. Every year in the US, there are between 1 and 2 million car crashes involving deer. These aren't rare accidents or one-off incidents. This is something that happens every single day, across different states, on all kinds of roads. As a result, about 200 people die each year, and tens of thousands more are injured. And that's just the human side. If you factor in vehicle damage, insurance payouts, and total losses, the cost goes over $8 to $10 billion a year. The problem isn't evenly spread either. Some states have a much higher risk. Places like Pennsylvania, Wisconsin, Michigan, Minnesota, Iowa, and West Virginia. And again, it all comes down to how the land is laid out. Roads run straight through forests and farmland, which also happen to be natural deer habitat. They don't avoid these roads or go around them. Their paths just cross right through them. It gets worse during certain times of the year. In the fall, during mating season, deer become more active and move around a lot more. That's when crash numbers spike. On top of that, most of these accidents happen at night or early in the morning, when visibility is low. And there's one more thing that makes this even harder to deal with. Deer don't usually cross the road alone. If one runs across, others often follow. A driver might avoid the first one and then hit the second or third just seconds later. And if deer are constantly putting pressure on roads, wild hogs take it to another level. This isn't just about crossing paths anymore. They actually destroy whatever they run into. Wild hogs in the US are an invasive species, and their population is growing fast. They reproduce faster than most large animals and can adapt to almost any environment. They don't need anything special. You'll find them in forests, open land, near farms, and even close to towns. The real problem is how they behave. Unlike deer, hogs don't just pass through an area. They start changing it. They dig up the ground, flip over the top layer of soil looking for food, destroy crops, and tear fields apart. In a single night, a group of hogs can ruin land that took months to grow. That hits farmers immediately. They lose crops, lose money, and can't just fix the land overnight. But it doesn't stop there. Hogs also damage irrigation systems and other infrastructure. Pretty much anything in their path can get destroyed. On top of that, they can be dangerous to people. Most of the time, hogs avoid humans, but under certain conditions, they can turn aggressive, especially when they're protecting their young or feel threatened. And that's what makes the situation more complicated, because now it goes beyond just farming. At first, this might seem like a local issue, something affecting a few farms or specific areas. But over time, it becomes clear the scale is much bigger. The population keeps growing, their range keeps expanding, and these incidents keep happening more often. It stops being just an inconvenience and turns into a real economic problem that affects multiple areas. Farmers take direct losses from destroyed crops and damaged land. Insurance companies see rising payouts as the damage becomes constant instead of occasional. Roads get pulled into this too. Animals end up on highways, cause dangerous situations, and add more pressure overall. At this point, the problem of wild animals moving through human areas is costing billions. That's not some future estimate. It's already happening right now. And this is where it becomes clear that simple solutions aren't enough anymore. When the damage reaches this level, the system starts looking for ways not just to deal with the consequences, but to actually limit the cause itself. If the problem is that animals keep moving freely across roads and fields, then the simplest solution is to stop them from getting through, not tracking them, not trying to control every movement, just physically blocking access. That's why fences started showing up all over the country. They're built along highways where deer collisions happen most often. They're put up around farmland to protect crops from hogs. Over time, this stopped being a one-off solution and turned into something used again and again. Along roads, it's especially noticeable. Long stretches of fencing run right alongside highways, sometimes for miles. In these areas, the fences basically become part of the road. They don't stand out as something separate. They're built right into the infrastructure. Their job is simple: keep animals off the road. The same idea applies to farms. Fences go up around the perimeter or in spots where animals usually get in. It's not a perfect solution, but it works fast. You don't have to wait, and you don't have to step in every time. The barrier just sits there and does its job. And that's the main advantage. It doesn't depend on someone being there at that moment. If the fence is there, it's already doing what it's supposed to do. When it comes to roads, the most common solution is what's called deer fencing. These are fences designed specifically for deer. They're taller than regular fences because deer can jump over pretty big obstacles. Some of these fences are several feet tall, and in most cases, that's enough to stop them. They're installed in high-risk areas, places where highways cut through forests or run near areas with a high density of animals. And the effect shows up pretty quickly. Crash numbers go down because animals simply can't get onto the road in those sections. It's a similar situation with farming. Fences help protect crops by keeping animals out of the fields. It doesn't eliminate the problem completely, but it reduces the damage enough for farmers to stay in control. And just when it feels like everything is working perfectly, a new problem shows up. Yes, fences do work, and that's why they're used more and more. But in reality, this system is far from perfect. Deer, for example, start adapting. They find spots where the fence is lower, or areas where it's damaged. Sometimes they just jump over it, especially if it's not tall enough or the terrain gives them an advantage. With hogs, it's even worse. They don't try to jump, they dig. They go under fences, find weak points, and break through them. So instead of stopping movement, the barrier ends up creating new entry points. In other words, it never works 100%. But people don't just leave it like that. They keep upgrading the fences. They make them taller so deer can't jump over. They reinforce the bottom so hogs can't dig under. They extend them further because short sections are easy to go around. And over time, more and more of these fences show up. They appear in new areas, get extended in others, and start connecting together. What started as a local fix begins to spread, and the bigger it gets, the more obvious it becomes. This isn't just a bunch of separate fences anymore, it's infrastructure. It needs constant maintenance, repairs, and expansion. Because the moment one section fails, the problem shows up somewhere else. This becomes especially noticeable with predators, mainly coyotes. They don't deal with fences the same way deer or hogs do. They behave differently. Coyotes don't try to go straight through a barrier. They look for ways around it, gaps, weak spots, or sections where the fence is broken or missing. And those spots show up all the time because of wear, weather, or just how long these fences are. On top of that, roads often have openings built in for maintenance, drainage, or equipment access. And that's exactly where coyotes move through. They learn these routes quickly and start using them again and again. So you end up with a situation where some animals are partly restricted, while others keep moving almost like nothing changed. That means the balance isn't restored. The pressure doesn't go away, it just changes form. Coyotes keep hunting, moving, and taking over the same areas. In some cases, they even start using the space along the fences more, because it's easier to find openings and navigate. And that adds another layer of complexity that wasn't really accounted for in the beginning. As a result, every section has to be constantly checked, repaired, and reinforced. Gaps need to be closed. Damaged parts need to be replaced. If that doesn't happen, the fence stops working almost immediately. And like we already mentioned, the system keeps expanding. Fences go up in places where there weren't any before. Short sections get extended. Separate segments start connecting together. And over time, all of this turns into a network. If you look at the whole system through the numbers, it becomes pretty clear why fence construction never really ends. Right now, there are about 30 to 36 million deer in the US. That makes them one of the most widespread large animals in the country. And at that scale, the problem doesn't just go away on its own. Even with active hunting, more than 6 million deer are taken each year, but the population stays stable or rebounds. With hogs, the trend is even more obvious. Their numbers have grown from about 2.4 million in the 1980s to nearly 7 million today, and they're still increasing. In Texas alone, the damage they cause reaches around $400 million a year, and nationwide, it adds up to billions. Then there's what's happening on the roads. With hogs alone, there are tens of thousands of collisions every year, costing over $100 million in repairs. But that's still a small part of the picture, because most crashes involve deer. They account for more than 97% of all collisions with large animals. Coyotes add another layer to this. They kill hundreds of thousands of animals every year. Official estimates put it at around 100,000 to 300,000 head of livestock annually, making them one of the biggest sources of losses for farmers. Put all of this together, and you get a system under pressure from multiple sides. And the key point is, none of these numbers are going down. They either stay the same or keep rising. That means the system isn't moving toward a solution. It's settling into a balance that has to be constantly maintained. And that's why fences don't go away. They don't solve the problem once and for all. They just keep it at a level people can still manage.